Unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably noticed the golden age of dirt cheap PC upgrades is coming to a pretty abrupt end. For the last year or so, we've been effectively spoiled. You could pick up a high-speed 2TB NVMe SSD for what felt like pocket change, and DDR5 memory finally became affordable enough for the average gamer to justify the jump to the new platform. Heck, even GPUs were starting to stabilize, and you could find cards for under MSRP. It genuinely felt like the supply chain nightmares, the crypto mining shortages, and the scalper prices of the last few years were finally behind us. Unfortunately, the hardware market had other plans, and now we're seeing huge increases in pricing in DDR memory, and while DDR4 and more importantly DDR5 is most affected, there is a lot more going on that's going to change everything, and for quite some time too. And effectively, the big thing navigating the whole debacle comes down to, yep, you guessed it, AI. The result is that the cost of your next gaming PC upgrade is climbing, and it's happening faster than many people realise. So today, we'll be looking at the whole situation. We'll look at exactly how bad the price hikes are, what other components might be in the firing line, and why buying a pre-built system might surprisingly be cheaper than building your own right now. But before we get into that, here's a quick word from this video sponsor.
This sucks. I wish I had an upgrade.
You have summoned the gaming genie. What is your wish?
Better gear? For an upgrade?
Your wish is my command. Zone Elite XL Matte, smooth, comfortable, spill resistant, and the sleek Zone Mat for precision gaming. NZXT Function Elite Mini TKL, magnetic switches, compact and precise. Featuring per-key adjustable actuation with 40 points of sensitivity ranging from 0.6mm to 4mm to fit your individual needs. Lift Elite wireless mouse, lightweight, responsive and ultra fast. Capsule Elite mic, pro quality audio, crystal clear, every game chat will be flawless. Genie approved upgrades. Make your gaming wishes come true with NZXT. Find out more by clicking the link in the description below. So let's not beat around the bush. AI is the big driver behind this, and with that comes the AI tax. But what exactly is it? Well, stripping off the marketing buzzwords, it's a supply and demand crisis, but one that's been artificially accelerated by a massive shift in industry priorities. To understand why your 32GB kit of DDR5 is suddenly a lot more expensive, you have to look at what the big players like OpenAI, Google and Microsoft are buying. Training these massive AI models requires an obscene amount of computational power, and crucially, an immense amount of ultra-fast memory. This is where high bandwidth memory, or HBM, comes in. HBM is the premium thing that powers the AI data centers, and right now, the companies building these centers, frankly, just can't get enough of it. The problem for us is that HBM, standard DDR5 and the NAND flash used in your SSDs are all made by the same three companies: Samsung, SK Hynix and Micron. These manufacturers have a specific amount of production capacity, and they can't just click their fingers and build a new fabrication plant overnight. Instead, those facilities take years and billions of dollars to construct. So, faced with limited capacity, they have to make a choice. Do they produce standard DDR5 memory for gamers where the profit margins are razor thin, or do they retool their production lines to make HBM for enterprise AI customers who are willing to pay almost any price to get their hands on stock? Well, the answer is pretty obvious. They're chasing the money, and with that, we're seeing a massive reallocation of manufacturing capability. The silicon wafers that would have historically become your next affordable SSD or RAM kit are now instead being used to create HBM3E for NVIDIA's latest AI superchips. SK Hynix and Samsung have effectively diverted their resources to feed the AI boom, leaving the consumer market with a shrinking supply. To make matters worse, this isn't an accident. After the memory market crashed in 2023 and prices hit rock bottom, these manufacturers lost billions. Now they're, I guess, quite happy to let supply tighten and prices rise to claw back their losses. They aren't just prioritizing AI, they're actively managing production to ensure the days of dirt cheap memory don't come back anytime soon. That is, well, what the AI tax is. We are effectively subsidizing the data center gold rush with higher prices on our gaming PCs, and now DDR5 is back to the prices it started at when it launched, and sadly, will continue to rise beyond that. So just how much extra are you going to be paying? Well, if you've been waiting for the Christmas holiday deals to upgrade, the numbers make for pretty grim reading. Let's start with DDR5, which is the most obvious victim here. Earlier this year, you could pick up a decent 32GB kit of 6000 MHz CL30 memory for around $100 or so, give or take $10, and it was the sweet spot for new builds. Fast forward to today, however, and that same kit is creeping up towards $440, meaning that we're seeing price increases of nearly 330 to 340% in just a few months. The premium you used to pay for high-end kits is effectively becoming the entry-level price again. If you thought you were safe, maybe sticking with DDR4, think again. As manufacturers shift their focus to DDR5 and HBM, the supply of DDR4 is drying up too. A standard 32GB kit of DDR4 3200, which was under $100 a few months ago, has seen price jumps of around 90%. It's no longer the budget-friendly saviour that it once was, and the price gap between the two generations is actually narrowing simply because everything is getting more expensive. Then there's storage, which might actually be the most painful part for the average gamer. We all got used to those incredible deals where a 2TB NVMe drive was around $100 or so. It felt like storage was finally a solved problem, though today you'll struggle to find a decent brand name 2TB drive for under $160. NAND flash contract prices have shot up by over 60% in some cases, and that cost is, well, being passed directly onto us. When you add it all up, the cost of a mid-range PC build has effectively risen by $250 to $300 just on memory and storage alone, compared to just a few months ago. That's the price of a CPU or a tier up in graphics card performance that you're now spending just to get the same capacity you could have had for peanuts earlier this year. For instance, I had a friend of a friend ask me a couple of weeks ago to spec up a PC with a $2,500 budget. 9800X3D, 64GB of 6000 CL30 memory, 5070 Ti, an overall good spec. Just a few days later, I had to ask him if he could up his budget closer to $3,200, to which he asked me what extra he'd be getting for that $700 uplift. I had to be honest and just tell him he'd be getting nothing extra, and that DDR5 in that capacity was now bordering on $1,000 in some cases. Now, I'm going to be the bearer of even worse news, as if you thought this was just about shelling out a bit more for RAM sticks and SSDs, I've actually got more bad news for you. This shortage is bleeding into everything that relies on memory, and that list is, well, a lot longer than you might think. The biggest elephant in the room is, of course, graphics cards. We finally got to a point where GPU pricing was somewhat sensible, but that's all about to change too. Your graphics card needs VRAM, usually GDDR6 or the newer GDDR7. And guess where that comes from? The same fabrication plants that are currently too busy making HBM for AI data centers. While Nvidia and AMD aren't using HBM for their consumer cards yet, the production lines for GDDR memory are being squeezed to make room for the enterprise stuff. We're already hearing reports from board partners that the cost of the VRAM modules is going to go up. That means the RTX 50 series and RDNA 4 cards aren't just going to be expensive because they're the newest generation on the market. They're actually going to be more expensive because the memory on them costs significantly more to produce than it did with the previous generation. There's even information leaking out that Nvidia aren't supplying their AI board partners with memory and instead are just giving them the GPU die or the core itself. There's then talk of AMD increasing the cost of their GPUs by $10 for every 8GB. So if you're looking for a GPU with 16GB of VRAM, that's an extra $20. And well, that's just the start. We've already spoke before about how Nvidia likely won't release the 50 Super Series refresh because of this whole situation. And instead of being a CES 2026 announcement, it will bleed into Q3 of next year. And that then puts it close to the RTX 60 series Rubin GPUs, making it even less likely that a refresh of Blackwell-based GPUs will ever happen. It's not just the components with memory chips on them, though, that are, let's say, suffering. The knock-on effect is hitting other parts of the industry hard. We actually reported recently that motherboard sales have seen a sharp decline, with some major manufacturers reporting drops of up to 50%. And, well, it's not hard to see why. When a decent kit of DDR5 costs nearly as much as the motherboard itself, people simply aren't upgrading. They're holding on to their old platforms a little bit longer, which means motherboard manufacturers are seeing their stock gather dust because, well, the cost of entry for a new platform has just become too high for the average gamer to swallow. And also, why would you buy a motherboard if you can't even get hold of the memory in the first place, let alone at what price it's at? Then you have laptops. Now, in the desktop market, you can at least choose to hold off on a RAM upgrade or buy a cheaper kit for now. With a laptop, you're actually stuck with what you buy, especially now that soldered memory is the norm. Laptop manufacturers operate on razor-thin margins, and they just can't eat a 30 or 40% increase in memory and storage costs, and instead they're going to pass that, again, straight onto you. We expect to see the entry-level gaming laptop price floor rise significantly in 2026, and the days of finding a decent spec laptop for under $1,000 might be paused for, well, a little while. Even consoles aren't safe. Microsoft and Sony use huge pools of unified GDDR6 memory in the Xbox and PlayStation. While they have long-term contracts that shield them from day-to-day spot price fluctuations, they aren't immune forever. If this shortage drags on through 2026 as predicted, don't be surprised if we see price hikes on hardware, or at the very least, a complete disappearance of those holiday bundle deals that we're used to seeing. Beyond that, think about anything that has some form of memory in it, from smartphones to tablets and even the things that you use daily that you don't even think about. A monitor, which has, albeit a small amount of memory for retaining the OSD settings that you dial in. Or a keyboard with onboard memory to remember your macros or RGB lighting settings. The simple fact is that anything and everything could be affected. So the million-dollar question that everyone's asking is, when will this all end? Well, if you're hoping I'm going to tell you just to wait until the new year and everything will just blow over, then you're going to be disappointed. And to understand why, we have to look at the history books, because the PC market has a nasty habit of repeating itself. We all remember the dark days of 2020 to 2022. It was the perfect storm. You had the global pandemic shutting down supply chains, forcing everyone to work from home and to buy new laptops or work PCs. At the exact same time, the crypto boom exploded and miners were buying pallets of RTX 30 series cards before they even hit the shelves. And gamers, well, they were left fighting over scraps at sometimes triple the MSRP. And it took nearly 2.5 years for that bubble to finally burst. And that was, well, only because the crypto market crashed and Ethereum moved to proof of stake, killing the demand, well, overnight. Sadly, other areas have historically been affected too. Go back a bit further to 2011, massive floods in Thailand wiped out the factories that produced the motors for hard drives, and almost overnight, the price of mechanical storage tripled and it didn't recover for years. Then think about the memory price fixing scandal of 2017 and 2018, where the big three manufacturers were accused of artificially limiting supply to keep prices high. The point is, when hardware prices shoot up, they don't come down quickly, as they essentially, well, excuse the analogy, take the elevator up and then the stairs back down. Now, the even worse news is that the situation we're in now is potentially worse than the crypto crash. Crypto was, well, a bubble, while AI is an industrial revolution. The demand from Google, Microsoft, and OpenAI isn't speculative and instead is structural, and they aren't going to stop building data centers next Tuesday. If anything, their hunger for HBM is increasing, well, rapidly. Industry analysts are now predicting that this tight supply will last well into late 2026 and possibly bleed into 2027. Remember, you can't just spin up a new silicon fabrication plant overnight. It takes 3 to 5 years and tens of billions of dollars to build a new fab and to get it to mass production. Even if Samsung and SK Hynix broke ground on new factories today, we wouldn't see a single stick of RAM from them until the PlayStation 6 is likely being teased. On top of that, you have to look at the motivation of the manufacturers. Why would they even rush to fix this? For the first time in years, they have immense pricing power. They're finally making healthy profits after a brutal 2023 and have zero incentive to flood the market with cheap DDR5 and will crash their own recovery. They are perfectly content to keep supply tight and prices high, whether you like it or not. So in all seriousness, if you're sitting on a stockpile of cash waiting for prices to drop back to 2023 levels, you might be waiting for a very long time. The new normal is here, and, well, unfortunately, it comes with a much higher price tag than what you're used to. Now, there is some form of silver lining in, well, all of this, and it comes from a place that usually gets a bit of stick from the hardcore enthusiast crowd. We've always preached that building your own PC is the way to go for a lot of users, as it's more flexible and has an element of fun and satisfaction. But sometimes a slightly different kind of approach or option can give you extra peace of mind, and in some cases, actually save you some money. And that's definitely the case right now. If you look at system integrators, specifically companies like CyberPower PC, you'll notice something a little bit weird. Their prices haven't shot up anywhere near as fast as the individual parts market. In fact, in many cases right now, it's actually cheaper to buy a pre-built PC from them than it is to buy the exact same components and just build it yourself. This isn't magic, it's just, well, simple logistics and purchasing power. You see, when you go and buy a stick of RAM or an SSD today, you're paying the spot price, which is the current market rate right now. And, well, as we've established, that rate is skyrocketing. Companies like CyberPower PC don't operate in the same way. They don't buy their RAM and SSDs one stick at a time. They buy in massive bulk. And crucially, they plan months in advance. We've heard that many of these larger integrators are actually sitting on likely 6 months worth of inventory that they bought back when prices were still, let's call it, reasonable. They effectively locked in their costs before the AI tax really started to bite. In fact, they have warehouses stocked with memory and storage that they acquired at 2023 and early 2024 prices. This means that for the next few months, they're effectively insulated from this madness. They can sell you a PC with 32 gig of DDR5 at the old price because they paid the old price for it. They don't need to gouge you to make margin because their cost basis is much lower than yours would be if you tried to build the same PC today yourself. This is inevitably going to lead to a huge uptake in sales for them as people realize they can't afford to DIY build the system that they want, but they can afford to buy a pre-built, which as mentioned, will net you the support and know-how of a trusted company, and you haven't got to build it yourself if you're maybe not comfortable doing so. Now, there is a bit of a caveat, as this isn't a permanent solution. While they're cheaper for now, that buffer isn't infinite. If this shortage drags on through 2026 and into 2027 as predicted, even the big system integrators will eventually burn through that cheaper stock. Once they have to go back to the market to restock at the new inflated prices, their system costs will jump up too. So if you're looking to buy, the window of opportunity where pre-builts are significantly cheaper is open right now, but it won't stay open forever, and they will be affected. Just not yet. So faced with rising costs in a market that frankly doesn't care about your bank balance, what's the actual game plan here? Well, first up, if you've been sitting on the fence about an upgrade, my best advice is to get off of it immediately. The old wisdom of wait a few months and prices will drop is frankly dead, at least for the foreseeable future. If you have the budget now and you need a machine, buy it. Waiting for a better deal in 2025 is a gamble where the odds are heavily stacked against you. The floor price for memory and storage is rising, not falling. Secondly, you need to seriously look at the pre-built market. I know we all love building our own rigs, but right now, pride is expensive. If you can save a few £100 or dollars by letting the likes of CyberPower PC or another integrator build it for you using their cheaper stock, that is money you can put towards a better GPU or a better monitor. Do the maths before you buy the parts separately. If the pre-built is cheaper, well, it's a no-brainer. If, however, you are dead set on building it yourself, you might need to adjust your priorities. If you see a deal on a high-capacity SSD or a fast RAM kit now, grab it with both hands. Don't wait until you've saved up for the whole system, because by the time you have the cash for the CPU and the GPU, that RAM kit might cost you 50% more or higher. And instead, treat memory and storage as priority purchases. Finally, be realistic about what you actually need. Do you really need 64 gig of RAM for gaming? Or is 32 gig enough? Do you really need that Gen 5 SSD? Or is a Gen 4 drive plenty fast enough? When prices are this volatile, overspeccing, just in case, becomes a very expensive luxury. Buy what you need to get the performance you want today, because future-proofing, well, it just got a whole lot more expensive. To wrap this all up, I think we need to be honest with ourselves. The reality is that the era of dirt cheap memory and storage is firmly over, and it's likely not coming back anytime soon. Feels like we just can't, catch a break in this hobby. We spent years fighting through the crypto mining boom, dealing with scalpers and waiting for GPU prices to normalize. And just as we finally get a moment to breathe and enjoy some affordable upgrades, the goalposts have simply just moved again. We're witnessing a fundamental shift in where the world's silicon is going. And unfortunately for us as PC gamers, we just aren't the priority anymore. For a long time, the consumer market was the driving force behind these companies, but that dynamic has flipped completely. We're now effectively second-class citizens to the data center. The AI tax is very real, and the manufacturing giants are quite happy to just let the consumer market starve if it means they can feed the insatiable appetite of the enterprise world for those all-important higher margins. Yeah, it's a bitter pill to swallow, especially when we have to admit that the DIY market, the very heart of what we do and love, is currently becoming the most financially painful way to even just get into PC gaming. It's a strange world we live in, where I have to look at you in the eye and say that buying a pre-built system is the smarter financial move than building it yourself. But The numbers don't lie. The stockpiles and purchasing power are the only things shielding parts of the market from this inflation right now. And that's a lifeline you should probably grab while it's still there. In all honesty, this shortage is going to change the landscape of PC building for the next 18 to 24 months. And it means that, well, we have to be smarter with our money. It means that the days of throwing 64 gig of RAM into a gaming rig just for the hell of it are long gone. And now we have to be just more calculated, more precise, and frankly, a bit less ambitious with our specs. Unless, of course, we have, well, very, very deep pockets. So where do you stand on all this? Is this the final straw that pushes you to delay your build until 2026 or even beyond that? Are you going to scramble to buy your parts now before the Christmas rush clears out the last of the cheap stock? Or are you actually considering the pre-built route just to avoid the headache of these, well, rising costs? Let us know in the comments down below, because I suspect a lot of people are going to be changing their plans drastically in the coming weeks. So there we have it. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, a like and a sub to the channel would be amazing. Also, if you love what we do and want to support us while getting some amazing extras like exclusive behind the scenes content, bi-weekly game nights, access to our super special secret area on our Discord, and much more, you can join the Patreon family. The link is, as always, down below. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one. See you later, guys. Bye-bye.